Okay, so this is the final part of our tutorial in which we basically just do kind of like a summary of what we've learned so far. So hopefully this will be nothing new. I hope I covered everything in enough detail that this is just kind of a recap. Okay, so this is the view controller dot this is the view controller.swift. This is where all the code goes, and this is our main.storyboard. So this is where we design our layout. This is kind of the phone emulator where we drag and drop objects into it. So we drag and drop them from here into here, and they appear, and then we have to initialize them in here. So we drag and drop them by clicking and waiting for this kind of screen to turn blue, and then we get that plus arrow, and then we can add them. And then to take them and initialize them in the code, we have to right click, and you see we get this blue line here. Then we can just kind of choose where to put them. Okay? Up on the right hand side, we have all of our kind of attributes. So if we select this, right now we've selected our label. We can change a bunch of the attributes directly in here, such as the lines, the alignment. We can change the text, stuff like colors, and yeah, there's lots of different fields that we can change. If we go to the ruler, we can change the margins. So we can either do that directly by selecting this and kind of dragging it up and down, or we can do it in here and kind of fine-tune it a little bit. So if you understand the widths and the dimensions such as width and height, it might be a good idea to do it in here if you want to be precise. Okay, and then there's stuff like documentation. This gives the identity and type, and yeah, this is just general information and attributes. So this is how you can modify a lot of these attributes directly in here, but keeping in mind that if you modify them in here and don't add anything in the code, they always contain these properties. For example, if we set the font color to be black in here and don't change it in the code, then no matter what happens, the label font color or the label text color will always be black. Okay, so if we want to change stuff while the app runs, so kind of if events happen, we might want to change the color, or we might want to change the label text, stuff like that. This is why we need to be able to modify it in the code. Okay, so once we initialized our label that we added, this is the line that it gave us, and it basically we gave it a name, and it gives us a type, which is a UI label. So then we can use this label name, and we can call it dot, and then whatever attribute we want to change, and then we can change it that way. So the attributes we saw that we changed were stuff like the text. We changed the text alignment, the text color, and then a couple of scaling issues such as the number of lines, and then whether or not we can adjust the font size to fit the width. Okay, so we just kind of put each of these in a function. In this one we changed the text to Mammoth Interactive. So again, we can change a text pretty easily by calling label the name.text and filling it with any kind of a string. So it can be a blank string, it can be a variable that's a string, it can be kind of like a number converted to a string or something like that, as long as it's a string. And then there are a variety of functions we can call on the text itself, such as the append and the remove functions were the ones we looked at. But there are many more than this. These were just two that I found I used very commonly. We can take the label text and kind of store it in a variable, such as we saw here. So these had functions called on them, but we could just comment this bit out and have the text equal whatever the current value of the label text is. Okay, so that's fine to do. Then any modifications performed on these would not actually affect the label text, because this is just storing whatever was currently in the text in that variable. We then looked at changing the alignment. So this right now it automatically defaults to be aligned from the left to right. We just changed it to be centered because there are going to be many times when we'll want to kind of change the alignment halfway through the app. We then looked at changing the text color. This is an important one to know, because I think being able to change a color when certain events happen is a really cool and neat little trick. So we'll definitely want to be able to do that. We just called a specific color on here, but you can customize this by kind of specifying what your RGB values are and what your alpha values are. Okay, then we change the scaling, and that was this function, and we called two attributes on the label. One was the adjust font size to fit the width, and that just ensures that the font can kind of scale down, the font size can decrease in order to make sure that all of the text fits within the label. If this attribute is false, then this just means that if the text within the label is too big, well, too bad, it gets cut off. Okay, so this just helps to ensure that it doesn't get cut off. And the number of lines was the second attribute, and that just kind of makes sure that we can have more than one line in the label. Because if this is not set to more than one, then all the text will try to fit on one line and will scale down accordingly. Okay, so this allows it to spill out over 2 lines because we set it to 2, but it doesn't have to. Keep that in mind, it doesn't have to take up 2 lines, that just means it can. Okay, so that was pretty much all we learned about changing the attributes of a label. Labels are, again, just a very good way to display kind of a static text. Okay, so these are pretty much read-only. The user cannot modify what the label is once the app starts. The only way you can do that is by modifying it in the code itself. And as a user, when we're running the app, we don't usually have access to the code. Okay, so labels, good way of just displaying text. They're not text input fields. Okay, so they're of type UI label. Again, modify the attributes through here or through the code itself. Alright, so I hope you learned a lot. I really hope you can kind of take something away from this and apply it to the apps that you build. I'm sure you'll be using labels a lot because I know I do. It's pretty much any time you want to display text that the user can't modify, you'll use a label. Okay, otherwise thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please check out our other videos. We'll do other tutorials on stuff like buttons and text fields, sliders, stuff like that. So stay tuned for those. Hopefully we'll see you next video. Otherwise, thanks for tuning in.